Hi, Tosca Lee here. And I just wanted to say a few words about the power of storytelling, the power that it has to bind us together as both writers and readers. I remember, I'll never forget, my second book signing. It was Hava, the story of Eve. And this reader came up to me. She had been standing in line for some time, and when she got up to me, she started weeping. And I just remember thinking, I don't know what this story meant to her. She started to kind of explain it, but I realized at that moment that it meant something to her that might have been very different from what it meant to me as I was writing it. And so whenever I get asked in interviews, what do you hope that readers will take away from this story? I always kind of veer away from that question, and I always kind of redirect it and say, you know, what a reader's going to take away from a story depends so much on what they came to the story with, what was going on in their life, what might have special significance for them at that time in their life. I've had people even say to me, boy, you know, the way that you highlighted this theme or that, and I remember thinking, I did. So, you know, it's so much, you know, as creators, we're really just creating dots for an image, and it's up to the reader to connect those dots in a way that makes sense to them, to paint the rest of the picture that we only begin to paint with the narrative. And what a wonderful thing that is. It takes so much pressure off as writers to know that we have a co-creator in the reader who's reading it and designing everything that they read in their own mind. What a wonderful thing that is. And as readers, how wonderful is it to be able to take part in that process and to create those stories along with the reader, the writer. So that's something that I love to think about, mull on. I've had readers write to me and say, you know, I went and I forgave somebody after reading this book. And I can tell you with utter certainty that I never put in secret code between the lines of what I was writing, hey, so-and-so, you know, their name, you need to go forgive somebody after reading this book. No, something was going on with what they brought to the pages, and so that impacted what they took away. As a creative, it's so wonderful to hear these stories. It's so wonderful to hear what can happen out of the creative process. And also at the same time, I feel privileged to hear these things, and I also know that there are oftentimes I don't get to hear what the result was, or I don't get to hear how a story touched somebody, and that's fine, because at the end of the day, it's almost really not my business. It's really the business of the reader. And so there's something wonderful and magical and mystical that goes into the process of creating, the process of storytelling, which is really all about letting our readers and ourselves know that we're not alone, right? There's something magical that happens on the page and in the process. And so for readers, I say find the books and read the stories that touch you. And for writers, I would say go into the process and leave a little room, even if you're a plotter like I am, leave a little room for mystery, because you just never know what's going to happen to you in your own life while you're writing, while you're engaging in this wonderful act of creation. And sometimes you may never know the way that your diligence and your hard work will touch others.
Welcome to Uncut with Lucia. I'm Lucia Matoonto, and welcome back to the RV Book Fair 2023. Please welcome my co-host, Pat Beckley. Pat is the author of 7 books and is my co-host for the second consecutive year. So, Pat, welcome to the RV Book Fair.
Thank you so much, Lucia. Thank you for inviting me to co-host with you again. It's always such a joy, such a pleasure to meet lots of lovely new authors. So I'm really excited about today because I've never met any of these ladies. So thank you very much. Okay, well, today we're meeting with a trio of amazing book authors to discuss the art of writing for children. Our first guest is Diann, and forgive me, ladies, if I don't pronounce your names correctly. Our first guest is Diann Floyd Boehm. Is that right?
That'll do. We go by BAME. That'll do.
Oh, okay, BAME. Okay. And internationally acclaimed author of children's books and young adult historical fiction. Welcome, Diann.
We also have Sonia Marta, a change maker and award-winning author. Sonia published her first poetry collection, Oracle, at the age of 10 years old. Yeah. Now she's 15 years old, and she has been inspiring thousands of children around the world. So welcome.
Hi, it's good to have you here.
Thank you.
And our third guest, and again, I apologize if I mispronounce, our third guest is Francine Piriana Davila, an author who... Is that good? Oh,
Perfect.
An author who has a unique background, having worked as a veterinary technician and later as an animal control officer. Welcome, Francine.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. Okay, Diann, could you please introduce yourself?
Sure, I'll be happy to. First of all, thank you for having me. I'm absolutely honored and thrilled to be here. So I'm a Texas girl in the USA. And as you stated earlier, I write children's books as well as young adult historical fiction. I've lived in a lot of countries around the world. I love traveling, but and my background is education, so I started out in the classroom. And I love children, and so it makes it very easy for me to write for children. I love their minds, and I just come to life when I'm around them. So that's me.
Yeah, your love for kids is so evident. All the time I interview you, I say, she's the best.
Thank you so much. You just, they're so magical, and we adults, you know, we can learn from kiddos, and it helps bring back the child inside of us that I truly believe we should never lose that child inside of us. It keeps us, I think, a little sane, a little humble, and precious. So there you go.
Thank you, Diann. And Sonia, could you share more about yourself?
Of course. Thank you so much for having me, Pat and Lucia. This is such an opportunity. I'd like to say greetings, good morning, good night, wherever you are tuning in from. So, as you have heard before, I am an author with 3 published books on the market. And recently, I've also been co-authored in this wonderful, wonderful project, Women Leading the Way. So my journey might have started out very young, but I like to think of myself as a small town girl that has very big dreams which scare her. And really, it's the way that I cope. So every day I just do a little thing for my future. And I like to think of myself as striving for women to have the education and the opportunity to fulfill their dreams. And I go by, you know, as an example that it is possible, and age is really just a number. So yeah, my books are the Rapping Austria and Bucharest City Tour, and I'm very happy to have been able to work on such projects and to thank my mom for being my #1 supporter. So apart from that, I also have a podcast, Storywise, and I'm planning on having a lot more stuff on it in the new season. And yeah, that's about me. Thank you.
That's wonderful, Sonia. You quite take my breath away. You're so young and so fabulous. And I loved your quote about you're a small town girl with big dreams, because that's exactly the same as me. But I started at the other end of the spectrum. You started your author career very young. I started mine just before my 70th birthday. So we're kind of opposite ends of the pole, but our heart's the same, I think. And I'm sure that applies to all of us. Anyway, enough about me. Francine, we'd love to hear about you as well, please.
Sure, of course. Well, as you said before, I started out working as a veterinary technician and then moved on as an animal control officer. So my first love, and still love, animals, and that will always be the same. Then I started kind of writing for animal magazines and about nutrition and cats and behavior. And after that, I kind of moved on. I kind of wanted to write for kids. I had two sons, and they kind of motivated me to write. So I started writing science fiction books for kind of middle schoolers, and then I moved on to kind of writing for younger kids. And for me, I absolutely love kids, and I'm trying to write books to help with a self-image and self-acceptance, and for kids to just love themselves for who they are. And for me, I'm continuing to write books about self-esteem and just basically to help kids.
Lovely. Amazing.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Mm.
So thank you, Francine. And let's dive into how you all ventured into the world of writing. Diann, you worked with children for several years, but could you tell us what sparked your passion for writing?
Sure, I'll be happy to. First of all, I've always been a storyteller, so that comes naturally, whether it was on stage, off stage, in the classroom, but and then as a singer. And then there came a time I was working in the garden, and the little birdie says, you know, you really need to put your stories to print. And I went inside and wrote a story down, and the rest is history.
Mhm. Yes. Pat,
Oh, it's so interesting talking to. This is why I love talking to other authors, because we're all the same. We're all very driven, but we also have this inspiration that just floats in, often at the most inconvenient times. I'm sure you'll agree.
Absolutely.
Like,
Covered in the mud.
yeah, like 3 a.m. when you don't have a notepad handy, and by the morning, if you don't write it down, it's gone.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
you'll spend the rest of your life thinking that was the best story ever, and now I've forgotten it. But I so admire you ladies for writing children's books, because that's a tough market to break into. But anyway, I'm diversifying. Sonia, what inspired you to start your writing career so young? Because you were very young too. I mean, lots of kids like dabble with writing,
Yeah.
but to actually get round to writing a whole book is very impressive.
What I think my mom helped me with a lot was ever since, you know, I saw the light of day, she would always get me books from all the cities she'd visit, because she used to travel a lot when I was younger. And she'd always read me books like Madeline in Paris or Katie in London, about the hometowns. And then as I started to grow up and I started to understand what she was reading, and I enjoyed a lot more, I fell in love with poetry completely and utterly. I was obsessed. And so I got myself a hold of all the collection of Topurceanu, which is a Romanian poet. And I just started reading all of her collections, all of the books. And then one day after kindergarten, I come home, I switch into my pajamas, I wait for my mom to come as well from work. And I look at her and I'm like, Mom, I want you to grab a book and a pen, and I want you to start writing a poem. And of course, at first she was like, wait, stop a second. It's not as easy as it sounds. And I was like, if you put your mind to something, then you can achieve it. And, you know, that started at 3 years old. I was already so determined. And over the course of 3 years, I started writing a poem. And then 3 years later, I have around 300 poems sitting on my desk.
Wow.
And as I grow up later, I know about everyday activities. Like the first time I saw my dad shaving, and I thought he was Santa Claus. And then in year 5, I start seeing David Walliams' work, and I get utterly inspired again. And I fall again in love with children's books and the beautiful illustrations. And I turn around to look at her again, and she knows something big is about to happen. And I tell her, Mom, how crazy would it sound like if I published these? And so that sort of started my career, and that's how I became a published author. And yeah, that was Oracle, my first poetry book. Thank you.
amazing. And you know, I know Sonia's mother, Claudia, and also she's fantastic. And she was always reading for Sonia every day. When Sonia wanted to write, she just said, let's do it. So she motivated
Yeah,
as
yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Although Sonia's personality is just like this. I interviewed Sonia when she was 13 years old, and I was so like, oh my gosh, this girl is going to conquer the world.
Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you.
That's so sweet. Yeah.
And Lucia, I think you're going to ask Francine now, are you?
I was just thinking about
Sorry. I think we're all rather in awe of Sonia, aren't we?
This
Because
is
we
true.
Yes,
think back to when we
definitely.
were her age. I mean, at 15, I couldn't have been so self-assured, so confident, kind of like this. Quite apart from not publishing books, I couldn't have done this whole public thing. So I think that's why Lucia was quiet for a minute, because she's kind of just wow.
I can't help but smile. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Really.
Pat, for saving my face. So, and Francine, your love for kids and animals also is evident. So, but what led you to become a writer?
Well, I always loved writing. In high school, I used to write all the time. And then I kind of took a break after I had gotten married and I had kids. I took a break for a while, kind of worked in accounting. And then I just I kind of got motivated again because I love kids so much and I really wanted to help them. And I decided, why don't I just start my career right now? I mean, I was in my mid 40s and I won't say my exact age, but I was in my mid 40s and I decided, let me just go ahead and just do this. And just I wanted to start my career and I figured and don't give up. You're never old enough to do something. You should never give up. And I felt like I'm in my mid 40s. I could do this. I'm going to try it. And I did it. And here I am, with 3 books under my name and, it happened for me. So I'm very, very happy and excited about that. It's never too late.
I agree absolutely, Francine. It's never too late. I wrote and published my first book during COVID, just before my 70th birthday. So, and now I've got 7 and lots of anthologies and all sorts of things. So I agree entirely. Never too late. And obviously, Sonia's also indicating it's never too early either. So how wonderful are we that we have careers that can take us through any age? I mean, I now intend to write till I die, and I'm sure you ladies all feel the same, because it's a deep passion within us that obviously we were born to do. So very, very exciting. Anyway, enough. I do, and I apologize, I do get very carried away. I'm very passionate, and so I kind of diversify. So if you're fed up hearing me, just tell me to be quiet. I won't be in the least offended. Diann, your book, Boomer the Curious Bunny, and in fact, I went on your website and saw all your titles. I mean, fabulous, like Charlie and the Tire Swing and A Time to Fly, and and Harry the Camel. I'm fascinated by that one. Anyway, your book Boomer the Curious Bunny features a lovely rabbit. What inspired you to write this particular story?
It's sort of twofold, and thank you for the question. A, I love rabbits. B, I saw a friend painting that she had. It was only about this big and a teeny tiny little rabbit in the forest. And I kept staring at it and I thought, there's a story there. But life went on, but I kept thinking about it. And one fast forward, I'm with my grandson outside playing, and I'm all about imagination. And actually, that's my tagline, embrace imagination. And as we're playing, the rabbit popped in my brain, and I'm like, I know exactly what the story is going to be. And after we got him to bed and everything, Boomer just came to life. And my grandson helped me name the rabbit, by the way. Is that special?
That's so special. That's so very special. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Sonia, the rapping astronaut, actually tells the story of also a courageous kid. I remember this story very well. So what inspired you to write this book?
So the Rapping Astronaut was probably my favorite project of all. And the way it came to life was actually after watching one of the master of cinematography, Christopher Nolan himself. And I just finished watching Interstellar. I don't know if any of you watched the movie. Brilliant, brilliant, so complex. And I came upstairs afterwards and I just sat down. I was starting to get ready to go to bed. And then I had a thought, and I just sat there, waited, and I thought, it's time to write a story. I feel this energy fueling within me. It's time to let it all out. So I opened a Word document, and then I started to write the story. I went with the flow. I was spontaneous. I added a couple of things based on my suggestions from teachers, from friends. And Ostro really is such a interesting character that I think anybody can relate to, because he's at the beginning, he appears to be your everyday boy. He walks around, he fits in, or does he? But then he wakes up and he goes downstairs and he looks at his mirror. And to give you a little bit of background information, Austria lives in Quietville, a city where no one has a mouth or no one can talk. And so he wakes up one day and he finds that he has a mouth. And so he's in a state of not belonging. And it's a story about finding your calling and taking action towards it, and inclusion and curiosity. And it's so beautiful, and it has so many meanings under it, and it's beautifully illustrated. And so I think Ostro was in some way or form a more saturated version of myself, going through the transition of primary to secondary school, and how I changed in terms of emotions and what I was going through up here and all losing friends, making new groups that I was hanging out with. So in all those ways, Ostro is a little bit of everyone. So yeah.
And I think as writers, we do our very best work when we write about things we really know, things that really touch us deeply, or we've experienced, or whatever. So thank you for that, Sonia. Francine, your book, The Lonely Chameleon, follows Charlie, a chameleon who doesn't really fit in. What gave you the idea of writing this book?
Right. So basically, Charlie is a chameleon and he's not able to change color. So he does feel left out and he cannot accept himself for who he is. So he kind of decides to pack up and leave. And he's trying to find some place where he would fit in, where people would accept the fact that he can't change color. So basically, he goes on this journey. He meets other animals on the journey who try to be friends with him, but he's too afraid to open up and be friends with them because he's afraid they might tease him. So throughout the book, he never accepts himself. He can never, see himself as being friends with anyone else. So my motivation for writing this book is to help kids understand that every kid and everyone is special and unique, and everyone has differences. And you need to accept yourself for who you are and how unique you are, despite your differences. And also, other kids should accept everyone else if they're different, and it should go both ways. And that was my motivation. Charlie's not able to accept himself. He eventually does, and he knows that being different is not something that's a horrible thing. It's very unique and special. And my main motivation is to help kids kind of understand that it's okay to be different. Everyone is different, and that's okay.
Pat, I told you, this panel is just...
It's fabulous. I'm so excited to be here. And Francine, I think you're so clever, because as adults, if we tell our children or anyone, it's okay to fit in, it's okay to be, it goes over their head. They're not interested. But in reading in a picture book, it goes in. They understand more. They want to understand. They don't want to be lectured by their adults around them. But to read in a book, I think it's wonderful. It touches their heart in a way that no words from an adult possibly ever could.
Exactly. So, I don't feel like they would listen to their parents. I feel like you're right. They would see it in a book, and then they would understand.
Yep, absolutely. Well done, you. I'm impressed.
Thank you.
So, ladies, all of you write stories that empower, include children, and provide them with inspiration. And this is just amazing. Please never stop writing. please. And Diann, what, in your opinion, what makes a great children's book?
Oh my goodness, that's a toughie. I think you have to have, it has to be something that the children relate to. I believe the pictures, because I do children's books with, a lot of illustrations that the kids just really can relate to, and even want to tell their own story all by themselves just because of the picture. And I also believe the story has to be written in such a way that the kids, they understand it. The vocabulary is not above them, and they totally get into the story. So it could be a very simple story, which we've seen, but it could also be one like you mentioned earlier, Charlie and the Tire Swing or Harry the Camel. There might be a lot of words to it, but the children totally get it. Harry doesn't like himself, but he just, because he wants to be a horse, because horses have a smooth back. But by the end of the story, he discovers there's nothing better than being who you are. And the kids just love that. They're like really voting for Harry. And then a simple story like Charlie, who discovers that, it took a long time for that tree to grow. And how did it get that big? And oh my goodness, do I have a great grandpa? Because it's intergenerational. And all of a sudden, I love it when I get emails from parents saying, you don't know what you did for us. It took us a week to get through that story, because all of a sudden, all my kid wanted to know was, who's their great grandpa? Who's my grandpa? Who's my great grandma? And that's exactly what I wanted that story. They learn patience about seasons and how things grow, but there's the communication that happens between the loved ones as they read. And to me, that's a great story.
Wonderful. And also you said something very important, Diann, is illustrations that help convey the story, emotions,
Yes.
and even actions of the characters, so kids can relate better with when you have good illustrations, interesting illustrations, color.
Yeah.
I agree entirely. And I think we don't always realize the impact of the books we read when we're young. Like, I still remember the books I read as a very small child, or mum read to me, or whatever. I can still remember. And so for something to last for 70 years in my case, that's quite phenomenal. That's a real impact, isn't it? And my daughter, who's 29, she often mentions books that I read to her when she was little, like Why the Sea is Salty, or, books that I didn't think were that important, but obviously they touch something deep within her. So I think you ladies are doing a fabulous job writing children's books. Sonia, you're younger than the rest of us, and you're a very young writer. Do you agree with these perspectives about what makes children's books exceptional, or do you have other views?
I think Diann covered everything, but I'd like to mention, I never thought about how children's books especially make the connection between the loved ones and the say the son and the mom or the grandma stronger. I feel like that's a perspective that's refreshing and that's really important at the end. And I was sitting here listening, and I completely agree. And Francine as well with the chameleon, when I thought about it, I think that books usually have a really, children's books especially, have a very light-going, easy pace, but really underneath it, there's such a strong meaning who you can relate to when you grow up and you realize, oh yeah, that story that my mom read to me when I was younger. Now's a really good time to apply it. And I'd like to emphasize more about the illustrations and how important they are, because while I was listening to you, Diann, I was picturing the Disney books my mom read to me, and I pictured like specifically Tangled, when she touches the ground with the grass for the first time that she comes down from the tower, and really stories, children's books especially, the way that you stick them in your head is through visualization. And so another thing that that you didn't really mention that I personally was really intrigued, especially now, since books have evolved. I went around in a bookstore the other week, and there was a flap through book with textures, and it didn't really convey a story, but it pictured textures. And I thought that was something that I've never seen before. You had like furry, glittery, hard, soft, cushy. It was something that was so unique that I really enjoyed. So something that is also intriguing in some way. Maybe it has a question to make you think in the story, or the flow, you know, it's all expected, and then something happens and you wait and you go like, whoa, what is this about? And it really touches upon you. So, but apart from that, Diann, you covered everything. They have to, the illustrations, they have to be easy, they have to be the right length. Sometimes I read a couple of stories that were really long. I bet that's not the case with any of you, but the illustrations and the interactivity of it and the message that they convey, and really how they strengthen relationships, I think that probably covers it. So yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Francine, from your perspective, what elements are crucial in creating a captivating children's book? Maybe
Well,
there is still something that you can tell us.
Well, for one, of course, what Diann was saying, that kids should be able to relate, obviously, to the character that they're reading about. They should look at the character and say, "Wow, that's me. I can totally relate to that character." And for me, secondly, the book needs to be very intriguing. It needs to envelop the kids. When kids are reading it, it should be able to take them to a different world. They should be able to use their imaginations. I know when I was a kid and I was reading, I loved reading science fiction. My favorite all-time book was The Time Machine. And every time I would read that book, or Stephen King, it would just take me away to a different world. And I think that's really important because it makes kids want to continue reading.
Yeah, I agree entirely. I mean, I guess all of us as young children were great readers. I mean, that's kind of how I feel we probably were. And you're right, Francine, it should transport you to another world entirely. So you're completely lost in that little world. And in your head, you picture all those characters. And I think that's one reason we get so disappointed when books, really good books we love, are made into movies, and the characters are totally different to the ones we've imagined in our heads. So I think as children's authors, you're doing a fabulous job, because you're presenting, you know, as adults, we read books and it's just text, but for children, they read a book and the pictures are there. So they know what those people look like. And I think it's wonderful. It's wonderful. Okay, moving on to challenges. Diann, can you share with us the most challenging aspect of creating stories and illustrations for children? Because obviously it's a tough market. Children are great critics. They will in any aspect of our lives. I remember when my daughter was little, and I'd be all dressed up and thinking I was looking lovely, and I'd be going out and she'd say, "Oh, Mum, you look so awful. Do I have to walk along with you?" You know, I'd say something she didn't like. And so they're much the same about writing. So sorry, Diann.
No, you're absolutely right. And that's one of the things I love about kiddos is their honesty. Prior to COVID, I would have a story, and because I was connected with a lot of schools, I would get permission to come and try a story out, and then I'd ask the kids what they thought, and they would tell me, and then I would go home and make some improvements, you know. And then before the story was finally, you know, published, I read them, you know, what was the final story is going to be, because I let them know that I want you to know this story happened because of you, because I wanted them to know that we don't just do it by ourselves, that it, you know, a lot of people can be involved. And I wanted them to feel that passion and start thinking, ooh, the stories I talk about to my friends are worth writing down. You know, I want to encourage them with their imagination. So that's what I do, is I check in with the kiddos, and sometimes it'll be my nieces and nephews, or I should say great nieces and nephews, but yeah, that's kind of what I do, is I check it out. sometimes I'm blessed because, as you mentioned earlier, we can all of a sudden in the middle of the night, you need to get up, I got a story for you. And you're like, no, I don't want to get up. You need to get up or I'm going to tell someone else the story, And you get up and then you have a story, an hour later for a kiddo. And of course you have to improve it, but the inspiration comes. But then again, I go and I check it out with one of my nephews and ask them what they think.
Yeah, this is a good idea to ask before publishing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's get their opinion before on the
They'll
market.
tell you.
And Sonia, what challenges, if you had challenges, have you encountered in your creative process?
I think the most obvious one is I'm a full-time student. So I go to school, and as I mentioned earlier, I have very big dreams, which, scare me and which I can't keep up with, which is amazing, but at the same time, a little bit overwhelming. So for me, one of the biggest challenges is keeping that, instead of work to life balance, school to writing balance. So for me, whenever I come home, especially now that I'm at IGCSE, it's really difficult to study, to do well in tests, to be interactive in class, but at the same time come home, publish, post on my social media, publish a book, write a book, edit the book, and all the process that I think we're all very aware of. So another challenge, actually, publishing my first book was I was under the age of 18, so my mom had to be the researcher that would go on Google and would be how to publish a book if you're under 18. And she really was my greatest supporter in that she made it happen. Because there are a lot of technical difficulties that you might not really be aware of. And then you go into publishing and you realize, hold on, there's a lot more to it than I thought came with a package. So in all that ways, I'm still evolving, but at the same time, it's something that obviously everyone goes through, maybe not with school, but with work. And so for me, it's just, especially that I'm a teenager and I'm developing, it's for me about all learning that process, about balancing and sometime, right now, currently, it's sacrificing studying for writing or the other way around. I'm not really good at finding the 50-50 balance, but I think that would be one of the things that always gets my attention, that I have to prioritize or goal set.
Thank you. Francine, now for you. I checked out your books, and you've written The Cloud Monsters and The Return of the Voltons, which both look fascinating. And then obviously The Lonely Chameleon. What difficulties would you think you've faced in your writing journey for children?
I think like everyone else, is basically managing your time. I work full time. I have 2 kids, and so it's just really hard to find the time to actually sit there and write and come up with ideas. So that's definitely been a real challenge. And I think for all of us, it's just managing your time. So, but I'm able to do when the kids are in school. That's when I get breaks from work. That's when I try to sit there and try to write, or I try to write kind of when the kids are in bed. So it's just, you just kind of had to try to find that balance.
Thank you. And sorry, Lucia, I am going to butt in here because I just want to say, I'm sure you're all aware that Lucia is a children's author as well as all the other things she writes. And so she, like all of you ladies, her books all have a message. And I'm sure you're all familiar with them, but they're very fascinating. Lucia, would you like to tell us about your journey as a children's author? I know I've sneaked that one in, but you don't often, you're always interviewing other people. You very rarely get the chance to be interviewed yourself. So
I wrote Zoe the Crab trilogy, and as I worked for more than 15 years with kids with disabilities, I used to tell them stories because, kids want to play. They don't want to be treated. So during the interval, I used to tell them stories and draw some characters. And if they trained that day or they were not complaining, at the end of each week, I was giving them the stories. And when COVID hit, I decided to write about Zoe, which was one of their favorite characters. And just also, she was not happy because she moves sideways and she wants to move forward. She was always thinking that she was silly because of this. And then, you know, the story and the let's say the message is just like yours. We are different, and that's fine. So is different. Boomer, I don't know if Boomer is different, but the idea, because I read many books from Diann, and her books are really touch about this important subject. And so it's just like your characters. She just wants to be happy, and then she finds out that being different is okay. It's not a problem. Thank you, Pat.
Hey, thank you for sharing that. Your turn now.
Let's talk about goals. So, Diann, what's next on your writing horizon? I'm sure you are writing more books. I know you've just published a book. It's young adult, your new book. Can you tell us a little bit about this book and your upcoming books?
Sure, I'll be happy to. Thank you so much. So Ruby Takes Chicago is the sequel to Rise, A Girl's Struggle for More. And it's based on a true story, my grandmother, historical fiction based in the 1920s. And what inspired the story was after being in different schools in various countries and discovering that a lot of kids like, well, I don't need to dream. The government will just tell me what to do. I was like, oh my gosh, we got to change that. And as far as I want you to dream, I want you to imagine. So I thought about, here was my grandmother born with 9 siblings. And at that time, in those days, if you were born in 1904, by the time you were 14, there was no such thing as a teenager. You were a child or you were an adult. Once you went through puberty, you got married. But luckily for her, my great-grandparents, her parents, believed in education. But still, after she finished high school, she was like, okay, they said, okay, like, you're going to it's time to get married. And she had already been planning. Now, long story short, she ends up getting a college degree. But instead of going home like she should on the train, she goes, Oklahoma, Chicago, Oklahoma, Chicago. I think I'll go to Chicago and then I'll let my parents know where I'm at. So that's pretty amazing to do when you're only 18 years old in those days. And in Chicago, a working woman was really considered a hooker. So she had a lot to learn from the Innocence times, because a lot of people just think of the 1920s as the roaring 20s and everything is all so wonderful. But actually in middle America, things were still so sweet and so innocent, and people were freaking out because, you know, the girls were showing more than their ankles, right? So there was a lot to learn. And the story is all about her inspiring others. And so I tell people, if you were born in 1904 and you made your dreams come true, everything we have for us today, let's think about it. What are your dreams? What do you think of? And even what your dreams are today may not be your dreams when you're 30, but you got to start somewhere. So let's get started. And so I know I'm talking a lot, but I'm excited because I see it working, you know. And so otherwise, my publisher wouldn't have called me and said, you have enough people who want to know what happened to Ruby. And that was like the greatest compliment forever, because it takes a long time to write a historical fiction. So my hat's off to people who write historical fiction.
You've struck a chord with me, because my first 2 books were historical fiction, then I wrote memoirs, then I blah blah, lots of different things. Anyway, I realized writing historical fiction how much I love doing research, which is something I hated at school. But of course, the internet makes it so easy now, doesn't it? And so I thought, why don't I write historical fiction books, but like you, based on my ancestors?
Yes.
And it's them. I've published two already. I'm just working on the third now. It's wonderful because you actually have to get inside their heads, don't you? And imagine yourself living their life. And I think it's so good for us all to realize that those people, generations and generations back, were exactly the same as us. You know, inside they were exactly the same. They wanted the same. They just wanted a roof over their families' heads, enough money to feed them, for everyone to be well and happy. And nothing's changed. And in fact, all over the world, that's all any of us want. But I'm delighted to hear you're writing historical fiction about your ancestors, because I've become a bit of a missionary about it in the last year. I say to everyone I meet, you really need to write your life story down, because when you die, nobody knows your life like you do. People think they know bits, but they don't know how you felt inside. And good for you. I'm very impressed. It's great.
Thanks.
And
I'll just add one little thing to that, if that's okay, because you and I can talk on camera forever about this. But for everyone listening, that you're right. We all have a story and a journey. But to get into the people's heads, that took a long time. How did my great-grandparents think in order for them to raise the children? How did they each came from a different state? We're not all the same in the States like people think. You know, it depends on how that environment is when you're growing up. And what I discovered was, even though I knew my great-grandma for like 10 years, I was so blessed. And then my grandma Ruby, extremely close to, I thought I really knew her until I started doing this. And then I'm like, wow, I didn't realize how much Grandma Ruby and I are just the same, you know, and that was really exciting, you know. So,
yeah. Oh, fascinating stuff. But we mustn't take up the whole interview, must we?
Sorry.
No. I'm the one who's dragging it on, not you. Your words are great. Sonia, with your mission to inspire young people, how do you plan to keep doing that? Are you just going to get out there and
I mean, who knows? Part of what makes it so interesting for me, like a good, intriguing book, whenever you just have to flip another page to find out what's happening, is I'm obviously a teenager. I might have an idea that's really foolproof now about what I want to do in 30 years' time, but then when I get to that point, I might be completely different, in a completely different place. So right now, I'm taking a step back from writing, and I'm actually moving into talking a lot more. So the way that I want to inspire people next is actually connect with them physically rather than through words. So what I'm working on this summer, July, is actually with Lucia as well. It's a pen to paper retreat for book writing. And it's a retreat that provides you with lifetime supplies that, you know, will set you for success, really. And you know, Lucia and I are a speaker, and my mom is one, and we will really provide you. It's a retreat, but at the same time, it's a workshop, and each day there's one of us speaking. And, you know, Lucia is going to be more about how to write a book. I'm going to be about social media, and my mom about publishing, self-publishing. It's something really enticing. I've never done this before. I've only heard about it. So I'm diving deep into water that I don't know really how to swim. But it's a risk I'm taking because it's something that I've really wanted to do. And of course, apart from actually talking, I plan on writing a lot more books, and like you, Diann, I actually want to experiment with young adult, not historical fiction. I'm not that much of a risk taker right now, but I've been planning to write one, and also for a children's book, something enticing around festivity, maybe Christmas is all I'm going to put out there, that I'm planning on launching soon. So yeah.
That's wonderful. And I have to tell you, thank you for the invite. And when I received the invitation, they are inviting me to be on a retreat in Mallorca. That's a no-brainer.
I mean, how could you say no? Yeah, it's something I'm really excited for, and I'm so excited that you're gonna be coming. It's gonna be amazing, I'm sure.
It will be. And I hope I don't know, maybe one of you or all of you can come to meet us in Mallorca.
Mhm.
Francine, can we expect more books from for you in the future? Or what else can we expect from you?
Yes, definitely. I had just finished writing a book called Ozzy and Ava, and it's about two unlikely friends, a cat and a bird. And basically, it's a book about bullying, and I definitely want to try to get that out there. I also plan on speaking at schools, speaking about bullying and self-love and self-acceptance, and trying to reach kids in hopes that maybe, hopefully, a few of them will listen. And that basically is my main goal, is just to reach these kids and talk about bullying and teasing. And hopefully I can help, even if I can just help one kid and receive that message, that would make me happy, and I would be content with that.
Mhm. And that's such an important subject.
Yes,
That's
definitely is.
Yeah. Especially me as a high schooler going through the time. So yeah, but I promise you, Francine, especially as I've also visited schools, there's guaranteed at least one kid who always has your full attention in every single class that you have. Maybe not the full class, but you always know there's always that one kid with a hand up and who's like fully got your attention. So yeah, it's something really cute.
You're right, Sonia. There's always going to be that one kid they'll reach your message and they'll actually get it, what you're trying to tell them.
Yeah.
Which makes it
Well,
all worth it.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Oh, I have so loved this discussion this morning. I could talk to you all for hours, but very sadly, that wraps up our discussion panel for today. It's been wonderful to meet you all here at the 2023 RV Book Fair, and I really hope we can all stay in touch because you've all got so much of interest to say. Thank you very much indeed, ladies. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been great meeting everybody.
It was nice meeting everyone.
Likewise, yes.
Yes.
Yes, and I want to say the same. And actually, I just love being here with you. And I'm very, very glad for you to accept being here, participating in the RV Book Fair. And also, I would like to tell our audience, our viewers, that for more information about their books, please visit our website, www.relatable-media.com. Stay tuned for our next panel. And again, thank you for joining us on Uncut with Lucia by wordauthors.org. And I'll see you next time. Thank you. Thank you, Pat.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.